I'm revisiting a favorite pattern for this week's project. It's McCalls 7323, and I made this years ago. I don't know how old the pattern is, but I want to say maybe 8 years ago. I made this pattern up in a stripe, kind of like this. It was sort of corals and creams. It was very pretty, and I literally wore it out. But the fit was great, and it was so cute. So I'm going to do this again, this exact same view, but I'm using a much more understated stripe this time. I bought this fabric a while back and have not used it, and I thought, oh, this will be great. So can you see, it's sort of a rib knit. It's really lightweight and soft. I have plenty of it. So I'm going to make a simple gray shirt, but it's going to have the directional stripe. It's going to be a little harder to see because it's so understated, but I think it's going to look really lovely. So let's get sewing. So when you go to cut this out, you'll have 2 pattern pieces that are cut open. So they will not be cut on the fold. You don't need 2 of them. One is the top of the front where the neckline is, and the second is the front bottom. And this is where our 2 stripes change direction. And you can see this one says to cut with the grain line, with our lengthwise grain, which is along with the selvage. You would line this line up with the selvage. And this is the one that if you choose to, you will turn it and go with the cross grain. So let's look at my fabric really quickly. This is my selvage edge. So you can see my stripes would run up and down or vertically on my body instead of horizontally, which is much more flattering. So when I go to cut this out, all of the stripes are going to go up and down except for the one right at the neckline, which will go across, which is fine. That's going to make the shoulder look broader. It balances out the hip. It's going to look great. Okay, here you can see my selvage edge at the very bottom. That's my lengthwise grain, and I have matched up this piece. That arrow runs with my stripe and with my lengthwise grain. And then over here, you can see that it has both grain lines on it. So you could have your stripes going the same direction in your pattern. You don't have to switch them. But on this one, you can see I've switched it so that now I'm using the cross grain for my lengthwise so that I can get the angle. These are asymmetrical pattern pieces that sew to each other. You cannot flip them. I could not flip over my pattern piece 1 and it will no longer fit pattern piece 2. You'll have the wrong side of the fabric showing when you match these 2 up. You have to keep them facing the same direction. If I flip one piece, I have to flip the other, or they're not going to go back together properly. So this is how I'm going to cut these 2. Then I'm going to fold over. See how that stuff folded up right there in the corner? That's going to get folded over to get my back, which is again straight up and down with the grain, and then I just have a little sleeve to cut out. So this is what it's going to look like when you go to cut out, and you need, like I'm using 60-inch wide fabric, and I have plenty of fabric left over. I could easily get a little skirt or use this for some sleeves in another project or something. So if you're going to do a bold stripe like this and you want it to match at this and make this nice little mitered corner, the way to do that is to, when you're laying out your pattern, before you do anything, you lay out your pattern on the fabric and you see where you want your lines to be, and then you transfer those markings. So you actually draw through your paper with pencil. Here's my big pink stripe, here's my little tiny lavender stripe, and you just mark those off. Then you shift that pattern piece and you line them up with this so that the stripes continue. And what that does is it helps you know where they should meet, even though they're going to change directions, so that when you go to lay it out, everything lines up the way it's supposed to. It will give you this nice effect, and you will get nice even stripes. If you don't do that, your stripes may not match up at all. They may be way off. Unlike something like this, it doesn't matter as much, but they won't line up. And it's going to be noticeable if you choose a bold, uneven stripe like that. You want this effect. It makes it look handmade, not homemade. Here's my back piece on the fold. And this is where I cut out the front of the pieces, and there's just enough of my fabric below it to cut out that. So then I have this side piece all preserved. I just have to get a little sleeve out of it, and I still have quite a bit of fabric left over. I'm all cut out, but I've got to set up my serger with the right color thread and set up my sewing machine with the right color thread, so I'm going to do that really quickly. If you are sewing this on a sewing machine, just set your sewing machine for a zigzag. It's not a very big one. You don't want the giant chunky zigzag for your seams. The smaller the zigzag, the more it's going to look like a straight stitch from the outside, but it'll still stretch for you on the inside. If you sew together a knit with a straight stitch, because the fabric gives and the stitch does not, you will get popped seams, and you don't want that. You want to make sure, and it's meant to give, like the garment is constructed and designed in the pattern for the fabric to give when you put it on and off, pull it on and off. So if you sew it with a straight stitch, it does not have the give the pattern expects you to have, and it's going to be hard even to get it on and off. So set your machine for a zigzag, or set up, I'm doing a 4-thread stitch to sew it together, and then I'm going to convert over to a 30-thread cover stitch to do the hemming. Now if you're hemming it, you can do a double needle on your sewing machine, and what happens from the front, it looks like a straight stitch. On the back, the two straight stitches are connected with a zigzag, because you have one bobbin going back and forth between the two needles, and it's a very stretchy hem, but it looks like a straight stitch from the front, which is very attractive. You can also do a triple zigzag. There's quite a few stitches you can do for hemming from the front. So I would take a scrap and play with it a little bit and see what you like for your own garment, but I'm going to set these up and then we're going to put it together. This is very fast. Once you've cut it out, it's very quick to go together. I have a shirt in just a little bit. Okay, I'm all threaded up, and the very first thing we're going to do, my directions are right up here, is we're going to take our pattern piece 1 and our pattern piece 2, and we're going to sew them to each other on that diagonal line. And depending on how you cut that out, you should get that nice little chevron or that miter. So this is what it looks like. Top part, you can see how stretchy that is, so you want to be really careful that you don't stretch out that seam when you're sewing it. I'm just going to put it under the serger. If you have a differential feed, you may want to engage that. If you're at the sewing machine and you have a walking foot or an even feed foot, you might engage that. It'll just help keep everything from stretching and pulling too much. Set it for a zigzag, pin it a whole lot, and be really careful. Okay, I'm going to sew this one seam, and then we're going to put it together at the shoulder seams. So I'm going to go ahead and do both of those things, and then I'll come back and show you how to set in the sleeve. This does not have any neck facings, so they just turn under the facing, the neck, 5/8 of an inch, and stitch it down. It's really, really, really simple. Great beginner pattern. Pinning in the sleeve now, and we're going to pin in the sleeve before we sew up our side seams. You can sew up the side seam and set in the sleeve, but on t-shirts, as a rule, I always put the sleeve in first, do what I call a flat sleeve instead of a set-in sleeve, and then I sew up the side seam from the underarm of the sleeve all the way around and down. So that's what I'm doing. So here's how the sleeve looks. There's a lot of stretch and give because we're working with knits. You want to be really careful that you don't stretch this out. There should be a little bit of ease in this sleeve, which will be really easy to just sew right in with this machine. It'll just take it right up and you won't have any pleats or little fold overs. So we're going to sew both sleeves in. This does have 5/8 inch seam allowance, so if you're at the serger or the overlock, you're going to lose some little tails, just a little bit. All right, I'm going to do sleeves, and then I'll show you how it looks. So I'm going to be really careful because this is such stretchy knit that I don't want to stretch out my neckline, but here we go. This is how it's looking. Here's my front. You can see my little seam down the front. I have my little cap sleeves in. So now I'm going to flip this around to the wrong side, and we're going to just pin up all the way down the side seam. So I'm going to start right here at my little sleeve, match up my little underarm sleeve, and then pin all the way to the hem and sew that up like so. Then I'm going to be ready to convert over to my 3-thread cover stitch to do the hems. So we're in the home stretch now. This is very, very quick to do. So here's what it's going to look like. I'm just going to sew up this seam. Again, don't stretch it. I'm being careful how I even hold it so that it doesn't pull out, and then we'll be ready. I will tell you, if you're not going to do the cover stitch, like this little neckline here, you could serge it first, and then you'll turn it under once, and then stitch it down. And you're going to do the same with the hem of the sleeve and the hem at the bottom. Or, because it's a knit, it won't fray, so you could just turn it under and stitch it. You just have to be careful that it doesn't roll back or overstretch, so you just have to kind of watch it. But we're in the home stretch, so I'm going to finish up these few things, set up my cover stitch, show you just what that cover stitch looks like, and then I'll show you the garment on. We're almost done. Isn't this fast? I just ran a scrap through to test my cover stitch to make sure that it's stitching properly, and it is. So here's the shirt together, except for hems on the inside. So we're going to do like we always do. We're just going to turn up a hem. It has 5/8 of an inch included for hem, so I'm just going to pin all of that up and run it through my machine and finish it. The neck is a little more tricky just because you've got a circle, but the nice thing is you're working with the knit, so it has lots of give. So you just want to make sure you don't stretch out that neck. You can stretch out this raw edge, that inner edge. You can stretch to fit. You don't want to stretch the folded edge. So you don't want it to, you don't want to put it on and your neck kind of have that lettuce effect, unless that's just something you're really into. This is meant to be a nice tight fitted little neckline. So I'm going to just sit at the machine. I might show a few close-ups of me serging it through just so you can see how that stitch looks. And then I'm going to try it on. I know it fits because I've made this pattern lots of times and I love it. This is what the cover stitch looks like when it's stitched out. This is the wrong side, the right side. Looks nice and pretty, and you can see it's nice and stretchy. All done. Look at how cute. Look at my nice stitching. Really happy. You could, I didn't, but you could even come across this diagonal seam and do cover stitch on it if you wanted to. It would be very adorable since the other's already stitched. All right, I'm gonna try it on and I'll show you what it looks like. Doesn't this fit great? I love the fit of this. I just think it lays nice. It's cute, easy to put together if you're a beginner sewist. It's a great one to get into. If you're an advanced sewist, you can do the stripes or plaids and have them meet at the seam and make it look really custom and interesting. It would be also really cute to do it in like a different fabric on top than on bottom. You can do this top piece and sleeves in one fabric and the bottom and the back in a different. Lots of variations, so you could really get creative with it. You could use up some other knit scraps and put together for a fun project. But it sews together so quickly. I mean, it's early morning. It's like 9 a.m. and I've already made another shirt. So another one that you could even streamline and make quite a few of if you wanted to. It's still in the pattern books, even though I've been sewing this, I want to say 6 or 8 years, so you can still get it. And this goes up to maybe it's size 24. I think it's a double XL, but because it's a knit, it fits really great. So lots of size options too. All right, see you next week for another fun video.